Just touch it, here. The voice was a low thrum like vibrating crystal, cutting through the hum of Kale's failing life support. He flinched, wrenching his shoulder away from the impossible creature currently curled beside the pilot's console of his cramped freighter, the Rusty Comet. Her scales shifted, iridescent blues and greens swirling like oil on water under the dim emergency lights. A long, sinuous tail tipped with something like dark feathers twitched, brushing his worn flight suit. Impossible. He'd salvaged the stasis pod from orbital debris less than a cycle ago. It was supposed to be empty tech, maybe some dormant biosamples. Not her. Not this glowing, scaled woman with eyes like polished obsidian and delicate, shimmering tendrils drifting from her temples. And definitely not this sudden, clawing itch under his own skin, a frantic whisper in the back of his mind that hadn't been there before she woke up. Connect. Closer. Now. Grubbed a hand over his face, trying to dislodge the thought. Get away from the console, he growled, voice tight. And stop doing that. She tilted her head, the movement fluid and alien. The tendrils near her wrists pulsed with soft white light. The flow is wrong, disrupted. Her fingers, long and tipped with what looked like smooth black talons, hovered over a cracked display panel showing environmental controls. Here. Before he could react, she pressed her palm flat against the sputtering screen. The lights flickered wildly. Kale lunged, grabbing her arm. Don't! Contact sent a jolt through him, hot and sharp like grabbing a live power conduit. The whispering in his head surged, turning into a low, guttural command: join, blend, seed. He recoiled, stumbling back against the bulkhead, breath catching in his throat. Her skin was cool, smooth beneath the fine scales, but the energy, it was electric. She watched him, her large eyes unblinking, head tilted again in that disconcerting, curious way. The lights on the console stabilized, the life support hum evening out to a healthier rhythm. The panel she'd touched now glowed with a faint greenish light that matched the pulses on her skin. Better, she stated, the single word resonating in the small space. Kale stared at his hand, then at her. The lingering tingle was fading, but the internal noise remained, a persistent background hum urging him towards her. Need. Want. Complete. What the hell are you? He managed, trying to regain control. And what did you just do? She turned fully towards him, unfolding from her crouch. She was taller than he'd realized, easily reaching his height, maybe more. Her form was slender but carried an undercurrent of coiled strength. The patterns on her scales shifted again, warm golds and reds blooming across her shoulders and down her arms. I am Lyra, of the Xylos. Her gaze swept over him, lingering on his hand, then his face. A flicker of something unreadable crossed her features. You are. Fragmented, unsteady. She took a step closer. The air thickened, charged with ozone and a faint floral scent he hadn't noticed before. The whispering intensified, a frantic plea now. Touch her, feel her, breathe. He swallowed hard, backing up until his shoulders hit the cold metal wall again. Fragmented. Lady, you woke up out of a junked stasis pod on my ship 5 minutes ago and started fixing my busted console with space magic. I think I'm entitled to be a little unsteady. He needed distance, needed to think, needed this damn voice out of his head. But the cockpit was tiny and she filled it, a mesmerizing, terrifying presence. Her lips, thin and dark, curved slightly. Was that amusement? Not magic, resonance. Your vessel sings a broken song. I encouraged harmony. She gestured towards the console, then back to him. You sing similarly, loud static, much yearning. Yearning, the voice screamed agreement. Yes, yearn, take, merge. Okay, harmony whisperer, Kale snapped, pushing off the wall, trying to project authority he didn't feel. New rule, no touching the ship, no touching me, got it? Lyra's dark eyes held his. The tendrils near her temples drifted closer to him, almost imperceptibly. Touch is communication, touch is necessary. The whispering surged, a wave of heat washing through him. Necessary, vital, now. He clenched his fists, fighting the urge to reach for her, to feel that jolt again, to silence the maddening internal pressure. Not for me, it's not. He pointed towards the small storage locker that doubled as a passenger seat. You sit, quietly, while I figure out what corner of the galaxy spit you out and who might be missing you. She didn't move immediately, just watched him, her iridescent scales catching the faint light, making her seem both solid and ethereal. Then with fluid grace, she dipped her head in a gesture that might have been agreement or perhaps just acknowledgement. She glided towards the locker, her tail trailing silently behind her. The whispering in Kale's head didn't stop, but it subsided slightly with the distance, settling back into that insistent background hum. Wait, watch, prepare. He rubbed his temples, leaning heavily against the console she'd somehow fixed. This salvage run had just gone from routine bad luck to deeply, fundamentally weird. And strangely, dangerously compelling. Kale punched in coordinates for Xantus Prime, the nearest semi-reputable trading post. Maybe someone there knew about the Xylos. Maybe someone could explain the insistent thrumming in his own blood that pulsed in time with the faint glow emanating from Lyra's skin. She sat unnervingly still on the storage locker, her obsidian eyes tracking his every move. The silence stretched, broken only by the ship's hum and the dam whispering in his head. Closer. Share breath. Share heat. He risked a glance at her. The light under her scales had shifted to cooler tones again, blues and silvers chasing each other across her limbs. She looked contained, waiting, but there was an energy coiled within that stillness like a predator conserving strength. So, he started, trying for casual, failing miserably. Xylos, never heard of them, big secret, fringe species. Lyra's gaze flickered towards the viewport, showing the stardusted blackness rushing past. We are selective. Selective, right. Kale snorted, fiddling with the nav controls. Anything to avoid looking directly at her. Means hiding from something or someone. The whispering spiked. Protect, defend, claim. He gritted his teeth. Where was this coming from? It wasn't just his thoughts, it felt deeper, more primal. Like an instinct he never knew he possessed suddenly clawing its way to the surface. Are you hiding? Lyra turned her head slowly, fixing him with that unnervingly direct stare. Survival is not hiding. It is strategy. Her tendrils twitched, catching the light. Are you hiding, Kale, pilot of this wounded vessel? He stiffened. I'm not hiding, I'm surviving. There's a difference. Is there? The question hung in the air, simple but loaded. Her voice was soft, yet it seemed to vibrate right through the deck plates. He hated how she could wrong-foot him with a single syllable. Hated the way his body reacted to her proximity, the heat rising in his face, the jumpiness in his gut. And most of all, he hated the insistent internal echo that agreed with her. Listen, understand, connect. Look, he said, forcing his attention back to the controls. I picked up your pod as salvage, standard procedure. You waking up complicates things massively. Someone somewhere probably wants their selective alien back, and they might not be polite about it. He glanced back. Are they not polite? A slow blink was her only answer for a long moment. Then, politeness is inefficient. When stakes are high, the scales on her shoulders darkened, shifting towards deep violet and black. Alarm bells went off in Kale's head, louder than the whispering for a second. Danger, threat, shield her. Okay, inefficient people, got it, probably heavily armed inefficient people. He ran a hand through his already messy hair. Which means docking at Xantus is a bad idea. They scan everything, if you're flagged. Lyra unfolded slightly, leaning forward. The faint floral scent intensified. This vessel requires repair, sustenance. You require grounding. Her eyes swept over him again, lingering this time. The resonance is unstable, growing stronger, stronger. Yes, good. The voice purred, sending a shiver down his spine. What resonance? You mean this noise? He tapped his temple. This feeling like my brain trying to rewire itself. Her expression shifted, a flicker of something that might have been surprise or perhaps recognition. You feel the joining already? Joining. Bond. Mate, the word slammed into his consciousness, sharp and undeniable. He recoiled mentally. Joining? No, it feels like interference, like static, like something trying to hijack my head. He glared at her. Is it you? Are you doing this? Lyra rose smoothly to her feet, crossing the small space in 2 silent strides. She stopped barely an arm's length away, forcing him to tilt his head back slightly to meet her gaze. The proximity sent the whispering into a frenzy. Touch. Now. Need. It is not me, it is us. Her voice was low, intense. The tendrils near her temples drifted forward, hovering inches from his cheek. He could feel a faint warmth radiating from them. A potential, a frequency seeking harmony. Your fragmentation resists. She tilted her head, mirroring his earlier movement. Why do you resist connection? Kale swallowed, trapped between the console and her unsettling presence. Her scent, the subtle shifts of light on her skin, the sheer alienness of her, it was overwhelming. The whispering urged him to close the distance, to bridge the gap, to touch the strange, glowing tendrils. Yes, touch, learn, complete. He forced himself to stand his ground, fists clenched at his sides. Because connection means complications, it means dependency, it means getting screwed over. I fly solo for a reason. Lyra's eyes searched his face. Alone is cold, inefficient. Her gaze dropped to his clenched fists, then back to his eyes. A hint of challenge sparked in their dark depths. And you are not truly alone now. Before he could process that, the ship lurched violently, claxons blaring. Red lights flashed, replacing the dim emergency lighting. Proximity alert, the automated voice squawked. Weapons lock detected, Cale swore, shoving past Lyra, heedless of the jolt as his shoulder brushed her arm. The whispering surged, momentarily lost in the adrenaline dump. Protect, danger, evade. On the main screen, a menacing silhouette resolved against the starfield, a ship bristling with weaponry, sleek and predatory. Definitely not friendly. Definitely inefficiently polite. And heading straight for them. Strap in, Cale yelled, throwing himself into the pilot's seat, hands flying across the console. The ship shuddered again as another proximity warning blared. Whoever they were, they weren't hailing. Lyra moved with startling speed, folding herself back onto the storage locker, her movements economical and precise. Her scales had shifted to a dark, mottled gray, blending almost perfectly with the shadows in the cockpit. Only the faint pulsing of her tendrils betrayed her presence. Fear. Danger. Protect her. The whispering was a frantic undercurrent beneath his own panic. He jammed the throttle forward, yanking the control stick hard to port. The rusty comet groaned in protest, inertia plating straining but responded sluggishly. The pursuing ship adjusted course effortlessly, staying locked onto their tail. They're faster, Cale muttered, scanning the tactical display. Minimal shields, pathetic weaponry, his ship was a scavenger freighter, not a war machine. Definitely faster. Lyra's voice cut through the noise, calm despite the flashing lights. Their resonance signature is aggressive, predatory. Yeah, I got that impression from the giant laser cannons pointing at my ass, Cale snapped, weaving through a sparse asteroid field, hopping to use the debris for cover. Explosive bursts blossomed behind them as the enemy ship opened fire. The comet rocked, alarms screaming. Evade, faster, shield. The internal voice was almost primal now, pure instinct. Can your resonance thing do anything useful, like, I don't know, make them spontaneously explode? Lyra's eyes were fixed on the tactical display Cale was watching. The light from her tendrils intensified, casting shifting patterns on the bulkhead. Resonance influences energy. It can disrupt or harmonize. She looked at him, her gaze sharp. Their systems are shielded. Direct influence is difficult, but focused. She trailed off, her attention seemingly turning inward. The floral scent in the cockpit intensified, becoming thick and almost cloying. Cale risked a glance. Her eyes were closed, the tendrils around her temples flaring with brilliant white light. The scales on her body shimmered rapidly through a spectrum of colors before settling on a vibrant electric blue. The whispering in his head changed again, becoming a low, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate in his bones. It wasn't words anymore, just power. A feeling of connection directed outwards. Focus. Disrupt, protect. He didn't understand, but he felt it, a strange alignment, as if some part of him was resonating with whatever she was doing. Another blast rocked the ship, closer this time. A console sparked, showering the deck with fizzing particles. Whatever you're doing, do it faster, Cale yelled, wrestling with the controls. The pursuing ship was gaining, lining up for another shot. Suddenly, the enemy vessel's movements became erratic. It veered sharply, its targeting lock flickering. A burst of energy erupted from its flank, not directed at them, but seemingly random, uncontrolled. What the? Cale stared at the screen. Lyra's eyes snapped open, her breathing slightly faster. The glow from her tendrils dimmed, the electric blue on her scales softening to a calmer azure. Their weapon systems temporarily disharmonized. She sounded strained. It will not last. Disharmonized? You mean you hacked them with your brain? Cale barely had time to process before the enemy ship corrected its course, its movements regaining their predatory smoothness. But the brief respite had given him an idea. He saw it on the nav chart, a dense nebula known for sensor interference and gravitational anomalies. A death trap for inexperienced pilots, but maybe, just maybe, hold on. he shouted, banking the comet hard towards the swirling, colorful gas cloud. Entering the nebula was like flying into thick soup. Sensors immediately went haywire. Visibility dropped to near zero outside the viewscreen, which was filled with roiling clouds of purple and gold. The ship bucked and groaned against turbulent gravitational tides. The whispering in Cale's head became muddled, confusing, drowned out by the environmental chaos and his own concentration. Lost. Signal weak. Find anchor. Lyra braced herself, her tail wrapped around the base of the locker for stability. Her scales shifted again, trying to match the swirling colors outside, a constant, mesmerizing flux. "They follow," she said, her voice tight. He could see the faint energy signature of the pursuing ship on the distorted tactical display, still closing, though more cautiously now. "Yeah, but they can't get a clean lock in here," Cale grunted, fighting the controls. "Just gotta lose them in the soup." He pushed the engines harder, diving deeper into the densest part of the nebula. Alarms shrieked as proximity sensors detected massive, unseen objects nearby, rogue planetoids, dense gas pockets. It was like flying blindfolded through a minefield. Suddenly, a violent tremor ran through the ship, far worse than the turbulence. The lights flickered and died, plunging the cockpit into absolute darkness, save for the faint, shifting glow emanating from Lyra. The engine noise choked and sputtered into silence. They were adrift, dead in space. In the middle of a lethal nebula, with hunters on their tail. And the only light came from the alien woman who seemed inexplicably, terrifyingly linked to the chaos suddenly erupting inside his own mind. The silence was absolute, terrifying. The darkness was thick, absolute, broken only by the soft, rhythmic pulsing of Lyra's bioluminescence. Her scales cycled through muted greens and blues, casting faint, moving shadows across Cale's face. He could hear his own ragged breathing, the frantic thud of his heart against his ribs, and the whispering. Oh God, the whispering. Without the ship's noise, without the external chaos of the chase, it surged back with terrifying clarity. Trapped, vulnerable, connect, need her. Wasn't just a suggestion anymore. It felt like a physical ache deep in his chest, a hollowness demanding to be filled. Power failure. Lyra's voice was soft, barely disturbing the silence. Cale fumbled in the dark for the emergency reboot sequence on the console. His fingers brushed against smooth coolness. Not the console, her hand. She moved silently beside him. A jolt less sharp this time, more like a current of warmth, flowed up his arm. The whispering turned into a wordless cry of need. Touch more, anchor. He snatched his hand back as if burned, heart hammering. Yeah, he croaked, finding the right panel by touch. Total failure. Backup power should shit. The panel was dead, cold, lifeless. Backup's out too. We must have hit something, or that last blast did more damage than I thought. He sank back into the pilot's seat, the reality hitting him. Dead ship. Inside a nebula known for tearing ships apart, with hostiles nearby. And an alien woman who made his brain feel like it was short-circuiting. This was bad. This was catastrophically bad. Lyra shifted beside him. He felt the air move, sensed her leaning closer. The floral scent intensified, sharp and sweet in the confined space. The vessel is cold, dormant. Her voice was a low hum, but the potential remains. He could feel the faint warmth radiating from her skin. The urge to lean into it, to seek comfort in the only source of light and heat, was overwhelming. The whispering agreed, crooning promises of safety, of connection. Warmth, safety, merge. Potential doesn't restart a fusion core, Cale muttered, trying to fight the pull. We need power. Life support is running on borrowed time, and those guys out there, he trailed off. They were sitting ducks. Lyra reached out again, her movements slow, deliberate. This time her fingers didn't touch his skin. They hovered over the dead console panel where his hand had just been. The tendrils at her wrist flared, casting a brighter, greenish glow. Energy flows, she murmured, almost chanting. It seeks channels, it desires harmony. He watched, mesmerized, as faint sparks flickered beneath her fingertips, tracing the dead circuits on the panel. The whispering in his head shifted, becoming focused, intent. A resonance built between them again, stronger this time, less jarring. It felt less like interference and more like a shared circuit. Help her. Channel. Combine. What are you doing? He breathed, afraid to break the spell. Encouraging the flow, she replied, her voice distant. The vessel remembers its song faintly. She glanced at him, her dark eyes catching the glow from her own hand. Your resonance can amplify if you allow it. Kale hesitated. Allow it, allow this invasion, this connection that felt both terrifyingly alien and strangely intimate. But what choice did he have? They were dead in the water, literally. Yes, allow, trust, survive. He took a shallow breath. Okay, fine, what do I do? Lyra's gaze held his. Reach out, not with your hand. She tapped her temple lightly. With your static, your yearning, focus it here. She indicated the panel under her hand. Kale closed his eyes, trying to push past the fear, the resistance. He focused on the whispering, on the strange energy thrumming between them. He visualized the ship's power conduits, the flow of energy needed to bring it back to life. He thought about survival, about the warmth beside him, about the desperate, illogical pull towards the alien woman who was their only hope. He reached out with that feeling, that internal pressure, directing it towards the dead console. For a moment nothing happened. Then he felt it, a connection clicking into place, a circuit completing. It wasn't just his energy or hers, it felt like something new, something combined. A low hum started deep within the ship's core. Lights flickered weakly on the console. Lyra gasped softly, the glow from her hand flaring brilliantly. The whispering soared, triumphant. Power, flow, life. With a stuttering cough, the main power grid came online. Emergency lights bathed the cockpit in a steady, low glow. The life support fans whirred back to life, circulating fresh air. Kale slumped back, drained but exhilarated. Holy shit, he whispered. It worked. Lyra withdrew her hand, the glow fading slightly. She looked at him, her expression unreadable but intense. The patterns on her scales swirled with vibrant color. Harmony, she said, her voice carrying a new depth, a resonance that echoed the hum in his own chest. The whispering was still there, but it felt different now. Quieter, less demanding, more like a shared pulse. Connected, together, safe. He looked at her, truly looked at her, not just as a weird alien complication, but as the being who had just saved them, the being he was now inextricably, terrifyingly linked to. The air crackled with unspoken energy. The near-death experience, the shared effort, the forced intimacy of the connection, it had shifted something between them. The desire, the pull he'd been fighting was still there, maybe stronger than ever, but now it was overlaid with something else. Gratitude, fascination, maybe even trust. Before he could analyze it further, the proximity alert blared again, slicing through the moment. The hunter ship was still out there. And now, their power signature was a beacon in the nebula's soup. They're close, Kale said grimly, eyes glued to the tactical display. The enemy ship was maneuvering, trying to get a firing solution through the nebula's interference. That power-up basically painted a target on our backs. He fired up the engines, the comet responding with a welcome rumble. Gotta move, now. Lyra was watching the display too, her expression focused. The vibrant colors on her scales had subsided to a watchful, swirling mix of deep blues and grays. Their resonance is agitated. Frustrated, hunt, capture her. The whispering, quieter but still present, interpreted the enemy's intent. Kale felt a cold knot form in his stomach. They weren't just after a ship, they were specifically after her. Any more tricks up your tendrils? He asked, dodging a chunk of unseen debris that set off alarms. Disharmonizing them again would be great. Lyra shook her head, the movement slow. The effort depletes, and they will anticipate it now. Stronger shields. She looked at him, her dark eyes serious. Direct confrontation is unwise. Evasion is still the optimal strategy. Working on it, Kale grunted, pushing the ship through a particularly dense patch of gas that blanketed the sensors completely for a few moments. When they emerged, the enemy ship was closer, much closer. Too close. Weapons-locked tone screamed through the cockpit. Danger, imminent, defend. The whispering was a frantic jolt of adrenaline. There was no time to evade, no room to maneuver. Kale braced for impact, his hand instinctively reaching for the emergency eject lever, though he knew it was useless in the nebula. But the blast never came. Instead, Lyra moved. She surged forward, placing both hands flat on the main viewport, right over the image of the rapidly approaching enemy ship. Her eyes closed, and the light radiating from her skin exploded outwards, filling the cockpit with an almost blinding emerald glow. The whispering in Kale's head went silent for a heartbeat, replaced by an overwhelming wave of raw emotion pouring off her: determination, fear, fierce protectiveness, and something else, something directed at him. Mine, protect, defend. It wasn't a thought, it was a feeling, a certainty that resonated deep within his bones. He felt an answering surge within himself, an instinct to shield her, to fight alongside her, overriding his usual self-preservation. Outside, the enemy ship suddenly shuddered violently, as if hitting an invisible wall. Its forward momentum ceased abruptly. Sparks erupted across its hull and its weapon systems went dark. It drifted, seemingly disabled, caught in the nebula's currents. The emerald light in the cockpit faded as Lyra slumped back, leaning heavily against the console. Her breathing was ragged, the colors on her skin dim and flickering. The vibrant floral scent was gone, replaced by a faint metallic tang like ozone. Cale stared at the drifting ship on the screen, then back at Lyra, stunned. What did you just do?" She looked exhausted, but her eyes held a spark of fierce satisfaction. Resonance shield, focus projection, very draining. She touched her temple, her tendrils drooping slightly. They are disoriented, temporarily. Temporarily? Cale shook his head, trying to clear it. The intensity of the shared emotion still lingered. Mine, the word echoed. We need to get out of here before they reboot. He pushed the engines to maximum, plotting the quickest course out of the nebula, back towards relatively safer space. The comet surged forward, leaving the disabled hunter ship behind. For a long while, the only sounds were the ship's hum and Lyra's soft breathing as she recovered. The whispering in Cale's head was subdued, a low, steady pulse that felt less like an invader and more like a companion. He risked a glance at her. She was watching him, her expression softer now, vulnerable. The earlier tension, the guardedness, seemed to have been burned away by the shared danger and the intensity of her protective outburst. "They want you," he stated quietly, turning back to the nav display. "Specifically you." "Why?" Lyra hesitated, tracing a pattern on the console with one fingertip. "I carry a lineage, a potential they seek to control or extinguish." "Potential for what?" "Life. Future continuation," the whisper answered before she did. Lyra met his gaze. "For my people, the Xylos, we are few. The joining, the resonance bond, it is how we endure, how we create anew." She looked down at her hand, then back at him. "The resonance between us, it is strong, rare. They detected it when I awoke. That is why they hunt." Cale felt a chill despite the cockpit's warmth. He wasn't just harboring a refugee, he was tangled up with the genetic future of an entire species. And apparently his own fragmented resonance was key. The implications were staggering, the responsibility terrifying. The whispering hummed in agreement, a soft counterpoint to his fear. Key, necessary, protect the future. He steered the ship out of the last wisps of the nebula into the clear black of open space. No pursuit detected. For now, they were safe. He cut the engines back to cruising speed, letting the relative silence settle. He looked at Lyra again. The exhaustion was clear on her face, but so was a quiet strength. And something else, an openness directed at him. The air thickened again, not with danger this time, but with a different kind of tension. The pull towards her, the echo in his mind, the shared vulnerability, it was all converging into a single point. He needed to understand. He needed more. But the intensity of the moment, the raw emotion still humming between them, felt volatile, dangerous in its own way. It was a partial payoff, a release of adrenaline and fear, but the underlying current, the breed whisper that was now inextricably linked with protect and connect, simmered just below the surface, waiting. They found refuge on a small, uninhabited moonlet orbiting a gas giant, just rock, ice, and vacuum, but blessedly empty and far from major trade routes. Cale needed time to repair the comet properly, patch the hull breaches, and figure out their next move. Lyra needed rest. The resonance shield had taken a significant toll. She spent the first cycle mostly dormant, curled on the storage locker, her bioluminescence a faint, steady glow in the dim light of the cockpit. Cale worked, pushing himself, the physical labor a welcome distraction from the turmoil in his head. The whispering had settled into a constant, low thrum, a reminder of the connection he could no longer deny. It wasn't shouting breed anymore, but murmuring possibilities, bond, share, heal. He found himself watching her as she rested. The way the light shifted under her scales, the delicate flutter of her tendrils in sleep, the innate grace even in repose. The fear was still there, the deep-seated resistance to entanglement, but it was being steadily eroded by fascination and a growing, unwilling tenderness. He felt protective, the memory of her fierce mind. Protect, defend resonated within him, stirring something primal and possessive he hadn't known he was capable of feeling. When she finally stirred, stretching with a fluid grace that made his breath catch, her eyes found his immediately. There was a new awareness in her gaze, a recognition of the shift between them. The air crackled. "You require sustenance," she stated, her voice still slightly rough from disuse. Kale gestured towards the nutrient-paste dispenser. "Help yourself, standard rations, probably tastes like processed cardboard." Lyra approached the dispenser cautiously, examining it. She poked a button and a bland, grayish blob extruded onto the tray. She sniffed it delicately, her nose wrinkling slightly. "It lacks life resonance." Kale chuckled, the sound rusty. "Yeah, well, five-star dining this ain't." He grabbed his own ration pack. The silence stretched as they ate, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was charged, expectant. He kept finding excuses to look at her, the way her throat moved when she swallowed, the slight flare of light at her temples when she concentrated on the unfamiliar food. The whispering intensified subtly. "Observe, appreciate, desire." "So," he said, breaking the silence, needing to know more. "This joining, this resonance bond, it's your species mating thing." Lyra finished her ration, wiping her fingers delicately. She met his gaze directly. "It is more than mating, it is integration, a sharing of energy, of essence. It strengthens both individuals. It is necessary for procreation, yes, but the bond itself sustains." Integration. Kale didn't like the sound of that. It sounded like losing himself. "And it's affecting me because our frequencies match. Because I'm fragmented. Your energy signature is open," Lyra explained patiently. "Unshielded, perhaps from past fractures." She tilted her head. "It calls out, and mine answered. The proximity, the shared stress, it accelerated the process." She paused, her gaze intensifying. "The shield I projected, it drew heavily on our combined resonance. Deepened the channel, deeper, stronger, irreversible." The whispering confirmed her words, a soft insistence. Kale felt a wave of heat flush his skin. He looked away, focusing on a blinking diagnostic light. "So this feeling, this pull, this voice in my head, it's not going away, is it?" "It is the sound of potential harmony," Lyra said softly. She rose and moved towards him, stopping just inches away. He could feel the warmth radiating from her, smell that intoxicating floral scent, now subtle and alluring. "It is the beginning of the bond." He could feel the tremble starting in his hands, the rapid beat of his pulse. His resistance, so strong just days ago, felt paper-thin now. He looked up at her into those dark, knowing eyes. The dominant, unpredictable alien was still there, but overlaid with vulnerability, with need. A need that mirrored the clamoring inside him. "Yes, bond now. Why me?" he whispered, the question raw. "Just some random scavenger." Lyra reached out, her cool fingertips brushing against his cheek. The touch sent sparks dancing across his skin, silencing the whispering for a blessed second, replaced by pure sensory overload. "Not random," she murmured, her voice a low vibration that resonated through his bones. "Resonance does not choose randomly. It seeks complement, balance." Her other hand came up, gently tracing the line of his jaw. Her touch was questing, curious, yet possessive. "Your static, it sings a song of loneliness, of guarded strength. It harmonizes with my own need for sanctuary, for partnership." The tendrils at her temples flared with soft golden light brushing against his skin. He didn't pull away this time, he couldn't. The pull was too strong, the need too sharp. He leaned into her touch, a choked sound escaping his throat. Her eyes darkened, the pupils widening slightly. The air crackled with tangible energy. The whispering returned, urgent, demanding. "Touch her, taste her, claim her." He lifted a hand, his fingers trembling, and brushed them against the smooth, cool scales on her arm. Her skin shivered under his touch, the scales flashing with brilliant crimson and gold. A soft hiss escaped her lips, a sound that was equal parts pleasure and surprise. The contact slammed into him, a wave of heat and alien sensation flooding his senses. Her emotions bled into him through the nascent bond, curiosity, rising desire, a surprising tenderness, and underneath it all, that fierce possessiveness. "Mine, It wasn't just her thought anymore. It echoed in his own soul. Mine. He slid his hand up her arm over her shoulder, his fingers tangling in the silky strands near her temple tendrils. She leaned into him, her body fitting against his with startling rightness. Her scent enveloped him, intoxicating. Her head tilted back slightly, exposing the long, graceful line of her throat. The invitation was unmistakable, primal. The whispering screamed, "Breed. Now, complete the bond." His control shattered. He surged forward, capturing her mouth with his. The kiss was brutal, desperate, fueled by days of suppressed tension and the overwhelming force of the nascent bond. Her lips were cool at first, then warmed rapidly under his pressure. She responded instantly, her mouth opening, meeting his intensity with her own. It wasn't human. There was a faint metallic taste, a subtle vibration against his tongue, an energy exchange that went far beyond simple physical contact. He felt her surprise, her curiosity, then a rising tide of answering hunger that matched his own. Yes, more, deeper. The bond flared, a conduit for raw sensation and emotion. Her hands came up, gripping his shirt, pulling him closer until there was no space left between them. Her scaled skin was cool against his overheating body through the thin fabric, a delicious contrast. He groaned, breaking the kiss only to gasp for air, his forehead resting against hers. Her dark eyes, inches from his, blazed with golden light. The tendrils at her temples pulsed rhythmically, brushing against his skin, sending shivers down his spine. "Kale," she breathed, his name a vibration against his lips. It wasn't a question, but an acknowledgement, a claiming. He tangled his fingers in her hair, tilting her head back again, needing to see her, all of her. The shifting patterns on her skin were mesmerizing, a kaleidoscope of reds, golds, and deep violets, reflecting the intensity of her arousal, her emotions bleeding into his awareness through the humming connection between them. Want, need, take. He lowered his head, kissing the line of her jaw, the smooth column of her throat. Her skin tasted faintly of ozone and that unique floral scent. A low trill vibrated in her chest, a sound of pure pleasure that ignited something possessive deep within him. He pushed her back gently, step by step, until her legs hit the edge of the pilot's seat. She sank into it, pulling him down with her, her long legs wrapping around his waist, trapping him against her. The position was awkward, cramped in the small cockpit, but neither of them cared. Need clawed at him, overriding thought, overriding caution. He fumbled with the seals on his flight suit, needing skin-on-skin contact, needing to feel her completely. Lyra watched him, her eyes heavy-lidded, a faint, knowing smile playing on her lips. She reached out, her long, cool fingers brushing his as he struggled with a stubborn fastener. Her touch sent another jolt through him, but this time it was pure fire. "Allow me," she murmured, her voice husky. With deft, precise movements, she unfastened the remaining seals, peeling the suit down to his waist. Her gaze swept over his exposed torso, appreciative, possessive. The light from her skin cast shifting patterns across his chest. Mine. The thought echoed, hers and his simultaneously. He reached for the simple, shift-like garment she wore, his hands trembling slightly. The fabric felt cool, slightly metallic, yielding easily under his touch. He pushed it aside, revealing the expanse of her scaled skin, the mesmerizing play of light beneath the surface. Her form was alien, yet undeniably female, elegant and powerful. Her breasts were high, firm, tipped with dark areolas that tightened under his gaze. The scales flowed smoothly over the gentle curve of her belly, down towards the juncture of her thighs. He hesitated for a second, awed, slightly intimidated. She was so different, so utterly other. Lyra leaned forward, capturing his hand, guiding it to her chest. Her skin was cool silk over firm muscle, the scales smooth and seamless. Beneath his palm, he could feel the steady, rhythmic pulse of her bioluminescence, a soft thrum that matched the resonance humming between them. Touch, feel. No. She arched slightly, pressing herself against his hand, a soft sigh escaping her lips. Her eyes fluttered closed for a moment, lost in sensation. He explored her gently at first, tracing the patterns of her scales, learning the texture of her skin. She responded to his touch with shivers, with soft hisses of pleasure, the colors on her skin flaring brighter with each caress. Emboldened, he lowered his head, tasting the skin over her collarbone, breathing in her unique scent. She tasted electric, exotic. Her hand slid up his back, her touch surprisingly strong, pulling him impossibly closer. The cramped space forced an intimacy that was raw, immediate. He could feel the heat building between them, the friction of her scales against his skin, the frantic beat of both their hearts. The whispering in his head was a roaring inferno now, demanding completion, urging him towards the ultimate expression of the bond. Join, merge, breed, complete. He met her eyes, seeing his own desperate need reflected there. There was no hesitation left, no resistance. Only the overwhelming imperative to connect, to merge, to answer the call that had been echoing between them since the moment she awoke. He shifted, positioning himself between her thighs, the contact intimate, electric. Lyra gasped, her hips lifting instinctively to meet him. Her eyes blazed, the tendrils around her temples glowing like miniature suns. "Now, Kale," she urged, her voice thick with need. "Complete the harmony. Join with me." He entered her slowly, carefully, mindful of their differences, yet driven by an urgency that bordered on painful. She felt incredible. Tight, hot, welcoming. Not entirely human, there was a subtle internal texture, a faint bioelectric pulse against him that sent shockwaves of pleasure straight to his core. Lyra cried out, a sharp, high-pitched sound that was pure sensation, her back arching off the seat. Her legs tightened around his waist, locking him in place. The colors on her skin exploded into a dazzling, chaotic display, fiery reds, electric blues, brilliant golds swirling and pulsing with the intensity of the connection. Joined, one, complete. The bond surged between them, a torrent of shared sensation, emotion, and raw energy. It was overwhelming, stripping away layers of his carefully constructed defenses, leaving him exposed, vulnerable, yet incredibly alive. He felt her pleasure as if it were his own, her alien senses blending with his human ones, creating a feedback loop that threatened to overload him. He moved within her, finding a rhythm that felt primal, instinctive. Each thrust sent waves of energy pulsing through the bond, answered by flares of light on her skin and soft, gasping cries from her lips. She met his movements eagerly, her body moving with a fluid grace that belied the cramped space. Her hands explored his back, his shoulders, her touch both a caress and a claim. The floral scent filled the cockpit, thick and intoxicating, mingling with the salt tang of his sweat. The whispering in his head had transformed. It was no longer a separate voice, but an integral part of the flow between them, a shared current of desire and intent. Ours, together, forever. He lowered his head, kissing her again, deeply, possessively. She responded with equal fervor, her tongue meeting his, tasting the energy that crackled between them. He could feel her essence pouring into him through the bond, alien and exhilarating, changing him on some fundamental level. He wasn't just Kale, the jaded scavenger, anymore. He was part of something larger, something ancient and vital. He was Lyra's. She was his. The intensity built rapidly, spiraling higher and higher. He felt the pressure building within him, mirrored by the sensations flooding him from her through the bond. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps, her tendrils flaring with blinding white light. Her inner muscles clenched around him, tighter and tighter, drawing him deeper. He couldn't hold back any longer. With a guttural groan, he poured his release into her, the physical culmination triggering an explosive surge through the resonance bond. It felt like hitting hyperspace without a ship, pure energy, pure sensation, pure connection. Lyra screamed his name, her body convulsing around him, her own release washing over him through the bond, a wave of incandescent pleasure and alien ecstasy that shattered his senses. The colors on her skin pulsed one last time, a blinding supernova before slowly softening, fading back to gentle, swirling blues and greens. They clung together, trembling, gasping for breath in the sudden quiet. The only sounds were their ragged breathing and the steady hum of the ship's systems. Kale rested his forehead against hers, utterly spent, his body humming with residual energy. The bond between them felt, solidified, settled, a tangible presence connecting their minds, their souls. It wasn't frightening anymore. It felt right, necessary. Lyra's hand came up, gently stroking his hair back from his sweat-dampened forehead. Her touch was tender, possessive. Kale, she whispered again, her voice soft, filled with wonder. He looked into her eyes, seeing the exhaustion, the vulnerability, but also a deep, unwavering certainty. The guarded walls around his heart felt like they had crumbled into dust. He hadn't just had sex with an alien, he had forged a bond that transcended species, transcended logic. He had answered the whisper. He had joined. He brushed a stray tendril back from her temple. It pulsed faintly under his touch. Lyra, he murmured, the name feeling solid, real on his tongue. The whispering was quiet now, a gentle hum of contentment, of rightness. Bonded, complete, beginning. He didn't know what the future held. Hunters were still out there. Her people might be looking for her. Integrating back into any kind of normal life seemed impossible now. But looking into Lyra's eyes, feeling the steady thrum of the bond connecting them, he wasn't scared. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel alone. He felt anchored, he felt home. The days that followed settled into a strange kind of domesticity aboard the Comet, punctuated by the constant awareness of the bond. It was a living thing between them, humming beneath the surface of every interaction. Conversations were often unnecessary. A glance, a touch, a subtle shift in the resonance conveyed more than words ever could. Kale finished the essential repairs, his movements efficient, driven by a new sense of purpose. He wasn't just fixing his ship, he was securing their sanctuary. Lyra learned the ship systems quickly, her affinity for resonance allowing her to interface with the technology in ways Kale barely understood. She'd coax stubborn relays into working, harmonize engine frequencies for better fuel efficiency, all with a gentle touch and quiet focus. The whispering in his head was no longer an alien intrusion. It had integrated, become a shared internal landscape. Sometimes it was Lyra's emotions bleeding through, a flash of worry when a sensor ghost appeared, a wave of calm contentment as they shared rations, a spike of possessive heat when his hand brushed hers. Other times, it felt like his own subconscious amplified, his guarded thoughts laid bare in the resonant space between them. There was no hiding, not anymore. One cycle, while Kale was recalibrating the long-range sensors, Lyra approached him, holding out a small, crystalline object she'd produced from a hidden compartment in her simple garment. It pulsed with a soft internal light. "This is a Xylo's memory shard," she explained, her voice soft. Through the bond, he felt her nervousness, her desire for him to understand. "It holds echoes of my home, my past." He took it carefully. The crystal was warm, smooth, vibrating faintly in his palm. As his fingers closed around it, the bond flared, and images flooded his mind, not memories exactly, but sensory impressions, emotions, fragments of Lyra's life, towering crystalline structures humming with energy. The scent of alien blossoms under twin suns, the feeling of communal resonance, hundreds of Xylo's minds linked in harmony, the sharp pang of loss, of exile, the fear of the hunters, the crushing weight of her lineage, the responsibility she carried. It wasn't a data download. It was empathy, raw and unfiltered, flowing through the bond, channeled by the shard. He saw her not just as the powerful, exotic alien, but as Lyra, lonely, determined, carrying the hope of her people. He felt her fear, her strength, her deep-seated longing for connection that had resonated with his own hidden loneliness. He lowered the shard, meeting her gaze, his own eyes stinging unexpectedly. "Thank you," he managed, his voice thick. Understanding flowed back from her through the bond, relief, gratitude, deepening affection. Seen, known, accepted. She reached out, her fingers tracing the lines on his palm around the shard. "Your past, Kale, your fractures, I feel their echoes, the loss, the solitude." He flinched inwardly, the old defenses trying to rise, but the bond held him open. He couldn't hide the shadows, the failed partnerships, the betrayals that had taught him to fly solo, the grief he'd buried deep. She didn't pry, didn't push. She simply acknowledged his pain, bathing it in a soft wave of acceptance, of shared understanding. Heal, share, together. In that moment, the last vestiges of his resistance melted away. This wasn't integration as erasure, it was integration as completion. She wasn't taking away his identity, she was adding to it, filling the empty spaces he hadn't even realized were there. He closed his hand around the shard, linking his fingers with hers. "They hurt you," he said quietly, the protective instinct surging, sharp and fierce. "The ones who exiled you, the hunters." Lyra's expression hardened slightly, the light under her scales shifting to steely gray. There are factions within my people. Some fear change, some resent the old lineage. Through the bond, he felt her resolve. And the hunters, they serve powers that profit from scarcity. A thriving Xylos bond, especially one like ours, threatens their control. Threat, danger, protect. The shared thought was immediate, instinctive. Then we don't hide, Kale said, the decision forming with sudden clarity. We find your people, the ones who believe, we fight back. Lyra looked at him, surprise warring with hope in her eyes. He felt her hesitation through the bond, the fear of putting him in danger, the ingrained instinct to protect the bond above all else. Kale, the risk is ours, he finished firmly, squeezing her hand. Together, that's how this bond thing works, right? Shared strength. Shared risk. A slow smile spread across her face, transforming her features, making her breathtakingly beautiful. The light under her skin warmed to brilliant gold. Yes, together, hope. He smiled back, feeling a lightness he hadn't experienced in years. The future was still uncertain, dangerous even, but it wasn't empty anymore. It held purpose. It held connection. It held Lyra. The whispering hummed between them, a song of shared resolve. Future, ours, begin. Plotting a course to find Lyra's potential allies required navigating treacherous political territories and fringe systems known for harboring information brokers and dissidents. It meant leaving the relative safety of their isolation and deliberately heading towards danger. Kale felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his gut, but it was overlaid by the steady, calming resonance of the bond, Lyra's quiet confidence bolstering his own. They pooled their knowledge, his underworld contacts and navigational expertise, her innate understanding of resonance patterns and Xylos' political factions gleaned from the memory shard and her own experiences. Communication became a seamless blend of spoken words, shared thoughts through the bond, and intuitive understanding. Lyra would point to a star chart, her tendrils tracing a potential route, and Kale would feel her reasoning, her assessment of the risks and potential gains, flowing directly into his mind. He'd counter with his knowledge of pirate patrols or corporate checkpoints, the information layering onto hers, building a shared tactical map. Their first stop was a notorious scavenger outpost built into the hollowed-out shell of a derelict generation ship, known only as the Carcass. It was a wretched hive of scum and villainy, exactly the kind of place Kale usually avoided, but rumor held that an old contact, a data broker named Flicker, operated somewhere in its rusting bowels. Finding Flicker might give them a lead on the Xylos factions Lyra sought. Lyra was apprehensive, the chaotic, fragmented energies of the thousands of beings crammed into the Carcass grating on her senses through the bond. Discordance. Danger. Stay close. Kale felt her unease as sharply as his own. He kept a protective hand near her arm as they navigated the crowded, dimly lit corridors, pushing through throngs of beings from 100 different species. The air was thick with smoke, engine fumes, and the stench of unidentifiable alien biology. Lyra drew attention, her height and bioluminescent beauty standing out even in the diverse crowd. Kale felt predatory eyes tracking them, felt greedy thoughts brush against the periphery of their bond. Threat. Target. Defend. He pulled Lyra closer, lowering his voice. Keep your light low if you can, try to blend. Lyra nodded, concentrating. The vibrant glow under her scales dimmed, settling into muted, shifting grays and blacks that mimicked the shadows and grime around them. It was an imperfect camouflage, but it helped. He felt her effort through the bond, the strain of suppressing her natural radiance. Finding Flicker took hours, navigating treacherous walkways, bribing informants with ship credits, and avoiding several potential muggings thanks to Lyra's subtle resonance warnings. A sudden feeling of sharp danger pulsing through the bond just before they turned a blind corner. Flicker turned out to be a wizened, four-armed Cygnian perched behind a mountain of discarded datapads in a cramped alcove reeking of fermented fungus. Kale. Blast me sideways. Thought you'd spaced yourself years ago. Flicker chirped, two hands adjusting spectacles while the other two typed rapidly on separate consoles. Still flying that rust bucket. She gets me where I need to go, Flicker, Kale said, leaning against the doorway. Need info, Xylos. Flicker's typing faltered. All four eyes swiveled towards Lyra, who stood slightly behind Kale, her light carefully muted. Flicker let out a low whistle. Xylos, high-risk, high-reward chatter on those lately, especially resonant ones. Flicker's gaze was sharp, assessing. Got hunters sniffing around, big credits offered, called the Void Syndicate. Kale felt Lyra stiffen behind him. Void Syndicate, ruthless, connected. We know about the hunters, Kale said smoothly, projecting calm he didn't feel. We're looking for the other side, the exiles, the resistance. Heard whispers of a hidden enclave. Flicker chewed on a fungal strip thoughtfully. Risky, very risky. Helping Xylos could bring the syndicate down on my head. Flicker looked from Kale to Lyra, then tapped a few keys. A holographic star chart shimmered into existence. But I owe you one, Kale. For that mess back on Cygnus X, a sector of the chart pulsed faintly. No guarantees, just whispers. A nebula system called the Serpent's Coil, supposedly shielded, hard to find, harder to get into. Kale studied the coordinates, memorizing them. Thanks, Flicker, we owe you. Just stay alive, Flicker chirped, already turning back to the consoles. And tell your friend nice resonance shielding. Threw my passive scans for a loop. As they turned to leave, Kale felt a sharp spike of alarm through the bond from Lyra. Ambush. Behind us. He spun around, shoving Lyra back, his hand instinctively going for the blaster holstered at his thigh. 3 figures blocked the narrow corridor, heavily armed mercenaries, their faces obscured by environmental masks, insignias Kale didn't recognize, but the predatory intent radiating from them was unmistakable. They were syndicate, but they were definitely hunters, and they were looking right at Lyra. Well, well, the lead mercenary drawled, his voice distorted by the mask's vocoder. Look what the salvage nets dragged in, a genuine Xylos, been a while. His companions raised their pulse rifles, the targeting lasers painting red dots on Kale's chest and Lyra's shoulder. Flicker squeaked and ducked behind the mountain of datapads. Kale's mind raced, trapped in a narrow corridor, outgunned. Bad odds, but he wasn't alone. He felt Lyra behind him, not fear but a coiled readiness, a surge of protective energy flowing through the bond. Together, fight. You don't want to do this, Kale said, keeping his voice steady, hand hovering near his blaster. Walk away, now, the mercenary chuckled, a harsh, grating sound. Walk away from a payday like this. She's worth more than this whole rust bucket station. The breeders pay top credit for fertile females, especially ones with strong resonance. His gaze lingered on Lyra, greedy and invasive. Kale felt a surge of cold fury, amplified by Lyra's own wave of outrage and disgust through the bond. Violator, threat, eliminate. Before Kale could move, Lyra acted. She didn't use a shield this time. Instead, she focused her resonance inwards, then projected it outwards in a tight, focused beam, not of force, but of sensory overload. The lead mercenary screamed, dropping his rifle, clawing at his helmet as if his head were about to explode. His companion staggered back, disoriented, firing wildly. Pulse bolts ricocheted harmlessly off the corridor walls. Go, Lyra yelled, shoving Kale forward. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed her hand, pulling her after him as they sprinted back the way they came, deeper into the chaotic maze of the carcass. Alarms started blaring throughout the station, security alerts triggered by the blaster fire. Doors slammed shut, sealing off sections. Figures ducked for cover or scrambled away from the commotion. They dodged through panicked crowds, Kale relying on Lyra's resonance sense to navigate, feeling her project warnings, dead end. Left, ambush ahead. Directly into his mind milliseconds before he would have made a wrong turn. They ducked into a grimy maintenance tunnel, the sound of pursuit echoing behind them. Lyra leaned against the cold metal wall, breathing heavily, the light under her scales flickering erratically. The sensory assault had cost her. They knew, she gasped, touching her temple where the tendrils pulsed weakly. They were waiting. Or they got lucky, Kale panted, checking his blaster charge. Doesn't matter, we need to get back to the comet now. He peered down the dark tunnel. This should lead towards the outer docking rings if my memory serves. They moved quickly, silently through the dark, dripping tunnels, the bond a lifeline between them, sharing vigilance, bolstering courage. Kale felt her fatigue, her lingering nausea from the resonance attack, and sent back reassurance, determination. Safe soon. Together. Keep moving. They emerged onto a deserted loading platform overlooking the docking bay where the comet waited. Below them, figures moved near his ship, more mercenaries, setting up a perimeter. They were cut off. "Damn it," Kale swore softly, pulling Lyra back into the shadows. "They anticipated us heading for the ship." Lyra scanned the docking bay, her gaze intense. Through the bond, Kale felt her assess the situation, the number of hostiles, their positions, the potential escape vectors. Too many. Direct assault, costly. Kale followed her gaze. The comet looked small, vulnerable, surrounded. But then he saw it, a heavy cargo crane positioned near the platform, its long arm currently retracted but potentially capable of reaching across the bay, close to the comet's upper hatch. An idea sparked, reckless and dangerous. He shared it through the bond, a quick sketch of intent, a surge of calculated risk. Crane, distraction, boarding. Lyra grasped the idea instantly, adding her own layer, resonance pulse, short range, disorient. He grinned, adrenaline surging. "Okay, on three." He felt her gather her remaining energy, focusing it. He tensed, ready to move. 1, 2, on 3, Lyra unleashed a pulse of pure sonic dissonance, localized towards the mercenaries near the ship. It wasn't incapacitating like before, but jarring enough to make them flinch, look away, momentarily confused. In that instant, Kale sprinted from the shadows, vaulting onto the crane controls. He slammed the activation lever, sending the massive arm swinging out over the docking bay with surprising speed. Lyra was right behind him, leaping onto the moving crane arm with effortless grace. He guided the crane, swinging them high above the startled mercenaries, who were now opening fire. Pulse bolts zipped past them. Kale brought the crane arm swooping down towards the comet's upper hatch. "Jump!" Lyra leaped first, landing silently on the hull. Kale followed, hitting the deck plating hard, rolling. He scrambled to the hatch controls, overriding the external lock just as Lyra blasted the nearest mercenaries with another, weaker resonance pulse, buying them precious seconds. They scrambled inside, sealing the hatch behind them as pulse fire hammered against the hull. Kale didn't waste a second, sprinting to the cockpit, throwing the ship systems online. Lyra was already at the navigation console, punching in the coordinates for the Serpent's Coil Nebula Flicker had given them. Engines roared to life. Kale slammed the throttle, the comet lurching upwards, tearing free from the docking clamps. Warning lights flashed, hull integrity compromised, shields failing. But they were moving. They shot out of the docking bay, leaving the carcass and the enraged mercenaries behind. Kale plotted a hyperspace jump, needing to put distance between them and their pursuers immediately. As the star lines elongated on the view screen, preparing for the jump, he glanced at Lyra. She met his gaze, her eyes bright with adrenaline and relief. A fierce smile touched her lips. Survived, together. He grinned back, his heart pounding. The fear was still there, but it was eclipsed by the exhilaration, the trust, the undeniable strength of the bond between them. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were fighting back, and whatever waited in the Serpent's Coil, they would face it together. The whispering hummed, a song of shared victory and anticipation. Forward, hope, home.